Some truths are so powerful that they can completely shift the way you see life. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. The Buddha's teachings hold one of those truths, a perspective that doesn't rely on waiting for a higher power to save us, but instead reveals that the answers we're searching for have been within us the entire time. It's not about rejecting faith, it's about awakening to a deeper kind of freedom, one that doesn't depend on anyone else's permission. And today we're going to explore one of the most fascinating and yes, sometimes controversial aspects of Buddhist wisdom: why the path to peace doesn't require belief in a creator God. This isn't just philosophy for the sake of debate. This is about understanding how your mind works, how suffering begins, and more importantly, how it ends. If you stay with me until the very end of this video, I promise you'll walk away with a new way of seeing life, one that could change the way you deal with challenges, relationships, and even your own inner battles. So please, don't skip any part, because each piece connects to the next in ways that might surprise you. And if you appreciate what we're building here, this community of wisdom seekers walking the path of awareness, then there's a simple free favor I'll ask you. Hit that subscribe button. It's one small click for you, but it helps us keep sharing these insights inspired by the Buddha's timeless teachings with people all over the world. Now let's begin this journey together. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't depend on luck, circumstances, or the kindness of others. It's a freedom that can't be given to you and can't be taken away from you. The Buddha called it liberation, a state where your peace is unshakable, not because the world has changed, but because you've changed the way you see the world. And here's the part that might surprise you. This path to liberation doesn't begin with looking to the heavens for help. It begins right where you are in your own heart and mind. For thousands of years, people have turned to religion for answers, asking for blessings, praying for protection, searching for a divine plan. But when the Buddha walked the dusty roads of ancient India, he took a very different approach. He wasn't dismissing faith or disrespecting the beliefs of others. Instead, he asked a much bolder question. What if we stopped waiting for someone else to save us? What if the end of suffering was something we could reach through our own understanding and actions, without relying on a higher power to intervene? This wasn't a rebellious idea for the sake of rebellion. It was a deeply compassionate insight, born from years of observing human pain and struggle. The Buddha saw that people were spending their whole lives hoping for a future paradise or fearing eternal punishment, all the while missing the life they were living right now. He realized that clinging to ideas about a supreme creator, whether in hope or fear, often distracted people from addressing the causes of their suffering in the present moment. Instead of asking people to believe in something unseen, he encouraged them to investigate the truth directly for themselves. He taught that every human being has the seeds of wisdom and compassion already within, just waiting to be nurtured. In his view, liberation wasn't a gift handed down from above. It was the natural result of understanding the mind, seeing the impermanence of all things, and letting go of the attachments that keep us trapped. And this is where Buddhism stands apart. It's not about rejecting God, it's about realizing that the path to peace doesn't require an external ruler of the universe. It requires you, your choices, your awareness, your willingness to look inward and take responsibility for your own awakening. That's the bold starting point, and it changes everything. You know, one of the things I've always loved about the Buddha's approach is how open and inclusive it is. There's no demand that you sign up for a set of fixed beliefs before you can even take the first step. You don't have to label yourself as a Buddhist to explore these teachings. In fact, the Buddha often reminded people that truth isn't owned by any religion, culture, or teacher. It's something each of us can discover directly in our own lives. That's why conversations like this are so valuable. They're not about dividing people into believers and non-believers. They're about opening doors to understanding, no matter where you're starting from. The Buddha never asked his students to blindly accept what he said. He encouraged them to question, to investigate, and to see for themselves whether a teaching was wholesome, beneficial, and freeing from suffering. This means you could be a devoted follower of another faith, a committed skeptic, or someone who's just curious about different perspectives, and you're still welcome here. The point isn't to replace your beliefs, it's to look deeper into the nature of life, suffering, and peace, and to see if there's something here that speaks to you. What I find so refreshing about this is that it takes away the pressure to choose sides. So often, conversations about God or spirituality can feel like a debate, with each person trying to win an argument. But the Buddha's path isn't about winning, it's about waking up. It's about understanding that our minds, our habits, and our actions shape the world we experience. Whether you believe in a creator God or not, the teachings on compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom can still transform your life in powerful ways. And maybe that's the real beauty of it. There's no barrier to entry. You don't have to qualify to begin. The only thing you need is a willingness to listen, to reflect, and to be honest with yourself. If something we talk about today resonates with you, take it and explore it further. If it doesn't, simply set it aside. That's exactly what the Buddha recommended. Take what is true and useful for you and let go of the rest. In this way, the path is always yours, shaped by your own insights and experiences. When most people hear the word God, a very specific image often comes to mind. An all-powerful, all-knowing creator who watches over the universe, guiding events, rewarding good deeds, and punishing wrongdoing. For many, this image is deeply comforting, offering a sense of protection and order in a world that can often feel unpredictable. In many religions, this divine being is central, the ultimate source of moral authority, and the reason everything exists. But in the Buddha's time, when people asked him about the nature of such a being, his response was often very different from what they expected. The Buddha didn't deny that people believed in gods or supernatural beings. He lived in a culture filled with such ideas. But he wasn't concerned with proving or disproving their existence. His focus was on something much closer to home, the direct experience of suffering and the way out of it. In the Pali Canon, when someone asked about the origins of the world or the nature of a supreme creator, the Buddha often remained silent. This wasn't because he lacked an answer, but because he saw that these questions, while interesting, didn't help a person take a single step closer to liberation. If you're trapped in a burning house, it doesn't matter who built it, you need to find the exit. This is one of the most striking aspects of Buddhist thought. It shifts the conversation away from who made the world to how do we free ourselves from suffering within it. The Buddha saw that endless speculation about creation or a creator could become a distraction, something the mind clings to while avoiding the real work of transformation. Instead, he taught that our time and energy are better spent understanding the nature of our mind, our attachments, and the causes of our unhappiness. In Buddhism, the question isn't so much does God exist, as it is what can I do right now to reduce suffering and cultivate compassion. This doesn't mean Buddhism is hostile to the idea of God. In fact, many Buddhist traditions acknowledge deities, but they are seen as beings within the cycle of existence, not ultimate creators. They can be symbols of wisdom, compassion, or protection, but they aren't the final source of liberation. The Buddha placed that responsibility and that incredible potential within each of us. In his view, awakening comes not from seeking favor from above, but from turning inward, seeing clearly, and walking the path with mindful awareness. When people first hear that Buddhism doesn't center around a creator God, it can sound a little strange, especially if they come from a background where faith in a divine being is the heart of spiritual life. But here's where Buddhism takes a different path. The Buddha wasn't concerned with winning debates about who or what created the universe. He saw that these questions, while interesting, often pulled people away from what truly mattered, ending suffering and living a life of clarity, compassion, and wisdom. His focus was always practical. How can we transform our mind right now? How can we free ourselves from the endless cycles of craving and dissatisfaction? That's why Buddhist traditions developed what's called a non-theistic worldview. Now, non-theistic doesn't mean cold, empty, or meaningless. It simply means that awakening isn't dependent on the will of a supreme being. In some Buddhist cultures, you will still find talk of deities, celestial beings, and spiritual realms, but these aren't the same as the all-powerful gods described in other faiths. Instead, they're seen more like symbolic guides, representations of qualities we can all develop within ourselves, like wisdom, compassion, and patience. They remind us of the potential we already carry, rather than powers that control our fate. The Buddha's message was deeply empowering because it put the responsibility and the possibility directly into our own hands. He taught that liberation doesn't come from waiting for a blessing or divine rescue. It comes from understanding the truth of our own mind and transforming the way we live. This doesn't mean that Buddhism looks down on those who believe in God. Far from it. The Buddha met people where they were, speaking in ways they could understand. But he always gently guided them back to the principle that your freedom depends on your own actions, your own insight, and your own willingness to wake up. Think about it. If your happiness depends entirely on an external force, then what happens if that force doesn't respond the way you hope? In Buddhism, your spiritual progress is never at the mercy of someone else's approval or intervention. You're the one steering the ship. The teachings show you how to navigate through the storms of life, but you're the one who must take the journey. And in that way, the Buddhist path isn't about rejecting God. It's about discovering that the divine qualities you admire already live within you, waiting to be awakened through your own effort, awareness, and compassion. There's a kind of freedom that no one can give you, and no one can take away. It's the kind of freedom the Buddha spoke about when he reminded his followers that liberation doesn't come from outside forces, not even from the most powerful gods or the most respected teachers. It comes from within. This is a truth that can feel both inspiring and intimidating, because it means we hold the responsibility for our own awakening, but it also means we hold the power. We're not waiting for a miracle or for someone to save us. We are the ones who can open the door. When the Buddha walked the earth over 2,500 years ago, he didn't position himself as a savior. He didn't say, "Follow me and I will take away your suffering." Instead, he said, "I can show you the path, but you must walk it yourself." That's a radical statement because it places the entire possibility of transformation directly in your hands. Think about that for a moment. Your happiness, your peace of mind, your growth, none of it is dependent on the approval or intervention of someone else. You already carry the seeds of wisdom and compassion within you. The only question is, are you willing to nurture them? This is why the Buddha's final words were so powerful. Be a lamp unto yourself. It's not just poetic, it's practical guidance. Being your own lamp means trusting your inner light, especially when the world feels dark. It means questioning what you're told, even if it comes from someone you admire, and listening closely to your own direct experience. In Buddhism, blind belief is never the goal. Insight is. And insight only grows when we're willing to look honestly at ourselves, our habits, our thoughts, our actions, and take responsibility for what we find. Of course, this doesn't mean we walk the path alone. We can have teachers, friends, and communities who inspire and guide us. But the real shift happens when you stop looking for someone else to do the work for you. No one can meditate for you. No one can let go of your anger for you. No one can live your life for you. The Buddha's gift was not salvation, it was empowerment. He gave us the tools, but he reminded us that the hands holding those tools are our own. And once you truly see that, you begin to understand that the greatest treasure you'll ever discover isn't out there. It's the awakened mind and compassionate heart already waiting inside you. Think about it. How often do we hear people say, "It's okay, God will judge them," or "they'll get what's coming to them in the next life"? In many spiritual traditions, justice is believed to come from an all-seeing, all-powerful judge who rewards or punishes us based on our actions. But in Buddhism, the picture is very different. The Buddha didn't describe a cosmic authority figure keeping score. Instead, he taught that the universe itself runs on a natural law, a kind of spiritual cause and effect that doesn't require anyone to manage it. This is karma. In simple terms, karma means that every thought, word and action plants a seed. Some seeds grow quickly, others take time, but eventually they bear fruit. If the seed is kindness, generosity or wisdom, the fruit will be peace and happiness. If the seed is greed, anger or ignorance, the fruit will be suffering. And here's the important part. No divine being decides this for you. It's simply how the fabric of reality works, like gravity. If you drop something, it falls. If you plant an apple seed, it grows into an apple tree. Karma works the same way, naturally, predictably, and without favoritism. This is one of the most empowering ideas in Buddhism because it means we're not at the mercy of an outside force to fix our lives. We are the gardeners of our own future. The Buddha said that we shape our world with our mind, and our actions are the tools we use to build that world. If we act with compassion, patience and honesty, those qualities will shape the path ahead. If we act with cruelty or selfishness, we'll find those same energies waiting for us later on. It's not punishment, it's simply the unfolding of the seeds we've sown. The Buddha also made it clear that karma isn't just about some distant future or the next life. It's happening right now. If you speak harshly to someone, you might immediately feel tension in the relationship. If you help someone in need, you might instantly feel lighter and more connected. Every choice creates ripples inside you and around you. And when we really see this truth, we stop waiting for cosmic justice and start living with awareness, knowing that the future is being written by what we choose at this very moment. That's the beauty of karma. It's not about fear, it's about responsibility, and it puts the power of change right back in your hands. There's a moment in life when you realize that the person you think you are, the me you carry around in your head, isn't as solid or permanent as you've always believed. We spend so much of our lives building and protecting this identity. We collect memories, opinions, possessions, and relationships, and then we stitch them all together into a story called I. But the Buddha looked deeply into this sense of self and saw something remarkable. It was more like a flowing river than a fixed stone. Everything we think of as me is constantly changing, moment by moment. The Buddha called this insight anatta, or non-self. It's not about saying you don't exist, or that your life isn't real. It's about seeing that what we call self is a collection of changing experiences, thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations and perceptions. None of these stay the same. Just think about it. Your body isn't the same as it was when you were 5 years old. Your opinions, your likes and dislikes, even the way you see the world, they've all shifted over time. If this self were truly fixed and permanent, none of that could happen. Why does this matter? Because so much of our suffering comes from clinging to the idea of a fixed me. We get hurt when people challenge our opinions because we think they're attacking who we are. We feel devastated when something changes because we believe part of us is being taken away. The Buddha taught that this grasping, this desperate need to defend and solidify the self, is like holding on to smoke. The tighter we hold, the more it slips through our fingers, leaving us frustrated and exhausted. When we start to see through the illusion of a fixed self, a strange and beautiful freedom opens up. We don't take things as personally. We stop needing to prove ourselves all the time. Life becomes lighter because we're not dragging around the heavy armor of who we think we are. This doesn't mean we lose our personality or our uniqueness. It means we live more fluidly, like water, adapting to the flow of life without getting stuck. The Buddha's insight into non-self isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a tool for liberation. It helps us loosen the grip of ego and opens the door to compassion. When we stop obsessing over defending me, we naturally have more space to care for you. And that shift, the Buddha taught, is one of the greatest steps toward true peace. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop living your life based only on what you've been told and start seeing things for yourself. The Buddha understood this better than anyone. He knew that beliefs, no matter how beautiful or comforting, can become chains if we never test them against our own direct experience. It's not that belief is bad, it's that belief without understanding can lead us astray. That's why in Buddhism the invitation is always the same. Don't just believe it, live it, test it, and see if it's true in your own life. The Buddha's approach was radically different from most spiritual teachers of his time. He didn't want followers who simply nodded along and accepted his words. He wanted seekers, people willing to look deeply into their own minds and hearts. He often told his students, "Do not accept my teaching out of respect for me, but examine it as a goldsmith tests gold, by cutting, burning, and rubbing it." That's a powerful image, isn't it? He was essentially saying, challenge me, question me, find out for yourself. This is why meditation is so central in Buddhism. It's not about blindly repeating mantras or rituals without knowing why. It's about sitting quietly, observing your thoughts, noticing how your mind clings to certain ideas, and watching how suffering begins and ends. When you do this, you're not taking anyone's word for it. You're discovering the truth firsthand. And once you've seen something for yourself, it's no longer a fragile belief, it becomes unshakable knowing. Think about it like tasting fruit. Someone can describe a mango to you all day, its sweetness, its texture, its fragrance, but until you actually take a bite, you don't really know what a mango is. Belief is hearing about the mango, experience is tasting it. The Buddha wanted us to taste the truth, not just hear about it. And here's the beautiful part. When you rely on direct experience, you become less dependent on external authorities to tell you what's true. Your life stops being shaped by second-hand opinions and starts being guided by wisdom that you've tested in the fire of your own experience. That's when spirituality becomes real, not as something you believe in because you're told to, but as something you live because you've seen it work in your own heart and mind. There comes a point in every seeker's journey when words begin to feel too small. You can read every book, memorize every teaching, and repeat every mantra, yet still feel that the deepest truth is slipping through your fingers. That's because the ultimate reality, the one the Buddha pointed to, cannot be captured by language. Words are like fingers pointing at the moon. They can guide your gaze in the right direction, but they are not the moon itself. If you mistake the finger for the moon, you'll miss the beauty and light that was meant to be seen. The Buddha understood this better than anyone. He didn't dismiss words entirely. After all, he spent 45 years teaching, but he knew they could only take you so far. Concepts are tools, not destinations. They're like maps, they help you navigate, but the actual journey has to be walked. You can't taste the sweetness of a mango by reading its description, and you can't feel the stillness of enlightenment by only talking about it. That's why Buddhism places such emphasis on direct experience, on meditation, mindfulness, and awareness, because truth has to be felt, not just thought about. Think about how often our minds get tangled in ideas, labels, and debates. We argue about what's right, what's wrong, what's true, and what's false. as if the ultimate answer could be neatly packaged in a sentence. The Buddha encouraged us to step beyond that, to stop clinging so tightly to the raft once it has carried us across the river. The teachings are that raft. They are priceless in helping us cross the waters of confusion and suffering, but they are not the shore itself. When you let go of the need to pin reality down with definitions, something magical happens. Your mind becomes open, spacious, and receptive. You begin to see things as they are, not as you think they should be. This is the essence of seeing with the inner eye, a clarity that arises when the noise of concepts fades and pure awareness shines through. It's not about rejecting knowledge. It's about allowing wisdom to blossom in the silence between thoughts. The Buddha's path invites us to explore this silence, to sit with the breath, to feel the rise and fall of the moment, and to realize that the truth you're looking for isn't hidden in words. It's living in your direct experience right now, and once you touch that, you'll understand why words will never be enough. There's something about stories that reaches us in a way pure logic can't. The Buddha understood this well. He knew that people remember truths not just when they're explained, but when they're lived and shared through examples. That's why so much of Buddhist teaching has been passed down through parables, dialogues, and the lived experiences of his disciples. A single story can open the heart, bypass our usual defenses, and invite us to see from a perspective we might have never considered. One such example comes from the Buddha's great disciple Sariputta, who was known for his sharp intellect and calm presence. One day, a wandering ascetic approached him with a challenge. Without belief in a creator God, your path is incomplete. How can you have a true spiritual life without acknowledging the source of all creation? Instead of reacting defensively, Sariputta responded with both gentleness and clarity. Even if a creator God exists, that is no reason to abandon the path we walk. We follow the Buddha's way because we have seen for ourselves that it leads to peace, wisdom, and liberation. It is not blind faith that holds us here, but direct experience. In that one answer, Sariputta reminded us that Buddhism's strength lies in testing truth through personal practice, not in clinging to ideas we have never verified for ourselves. Another profound moment comes from the Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha addressed a group of villagers who were confused by the many teachers and doctrines around them. They wanted to know who was telling the truth. The Buddha didn't say, "Believe me, I have the answers." Instead, he gave them something far more valuable: the freedom to question. He told them not to accept anything simply because it was tradition, scripture, popular opinion, or even because he himself had said it. Instead, he urged them to investigate deeply. If something leads to kindness, peace, and benefit for oneself and others, then follow it. If it leads to harm, abandon it. This was radical for its time, and even today, it stands as a call to trust our own insight over blind obedience. In the end, the greatest teacher you will ever meet is the one within you. The Buddha's path was never about following blindly. It was about waking up, seeing clearly, and living with compassion and wisdom. So keep walking, keep questioning, and keep trusting that quiet light inside you. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to watch one of the videos on your screen now. Let it guide you deeper on your journey. Thank you for being a part of Buddhist Journey, and may you always walk your path with peace in your heart.